Welcome to another episode of the Managing Happiness Show, where we interview successful entrepreneurs on how they manage to have a happy family life while dealing with the madness of entrepreneurship. I'm your host, David Henzel, and today's guest is Peter Awad, the godfather of entrepreneurial work-life balance. I'm super stoked to have you on. When Peter's not traveling the country with his wife, Melissa, and his 4 kids, he's challenging what it means to raise a family in the connected economy. He's the founder and host of the Slow Hustle podcast, where he interviews founders to dissect how they manage the responsibilities of scaling a business, while also incorporating slowness into their business and personal life. So we're very aligned in terms of what we're doing here, what I'm doing with my podcast. And Peter's also the co-founder of Mission Meats, a mission-based snack food company. Mission Meats, fucking hell. So I think I have a problem to talk about Mission Meats because I'm a vegan, and we're just going to leave it at this.
That's right. Your soul will not let you talk about it.
Yeah, it's like, don't talk about meat. But anyhow, I'm super stoked to have you on, man.
I'm excited to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
We have so many things in common, like in terms of the similarities in the podcast. You also have an e-commerce business. Mm-hmm. Import auto performance, and I have an e-commerce background as well. Back in Germany, I had an e-commerce business which I sold, which gave me the money to get my investor visa to come to the States. And your mission-based snack food company, I'm a big believer in having a for-purpose business, like a business that actually does something good, not just for profit. I don't like non-profits because it feels like they always have to beg to move forward. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'd love to talk about all these points, and maybe we start out with what drives you, kind of why do you do what you do, and do you have a personal mission statement? Because with managing happiness, a big thing is to apply business principles to our personal life. So I always ask people if they have a personal mission statement.
Yeah, I do not have an official personal mission statement, so you can just slap me on the wrist, man. And you and I were talking about managing happiness and the framework that you've put together, and I think it's phenomenal. And my wife and I talk about all the time about how like some of the business stuff just doesn't bleed over into personal lives, and I don't know why we don't do that. So I love what you're doing. I don't have an official mission statement, but almost everything that we do as a family, as a business, is all powered by the need for autonomy. Like we want to be able to do what we want, when we want, how we want, where we want. And of course, you can't do that all of the time, but we want to do that as much as possible, right? So autonomy powers almost everything. And the reason we are powered by the need for autonomy is because I want to spend as much time with my family as possible. And we want to do that in places that are exciting, places that stretch us in fun ways and difficult ways, and then allow us to get tighter knit as a family to better know each other. Because I don't want to live a life of regret where, 20 years from now, I look back and realize I was really great at working and grinding, but not really great at the slowness part, right? And so that's where kind of slow hustle came to be. It's because I want to have this life where I'm not being very rushed and hurried and frazzled and having all the bad stress and none of the good stress. And so not an official mission statement, but autonomy, that one word, is always kind of hovering in the back of my mind.
That's awesome. And I also think alike in terms of not dying with regret is like a really big thing for me. I had a wake-up call when my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer 3.5 years ago, when this was like really the wake-up moment for me, where I envisioned me on my deathbed, kind of being reminded of like, hey, we all go at some point, and I want to make sure that I have an impact in the world and I don't die with regrets. And this also led me to selling Max at the end, because it had an impact on our employees' lives and on our lives, but not in the bigger picture. So this was kind of like the wake up moment for me. And real big fan of what you do with your podcast. And can you describe what slowness means to you? So, because you're going to use this term, probably second nature to you, and somebody who's not familiar with it. So that's,
slowness to me means so many different things, and it'll mean different things to different people. And we'd always end the podcast with, why is the message important to you? And I was always surprised to hear what someone's interpretation of it was, right? They may think slow hustle was one thing versus another. And so, but for me, I mean, it's having the margin and having the space to really stop and to think and to spend time the way that you want to spend time, to work on the things that you want to work on with the people that you want to work on it with, not being constantly frazzled and being reactive versus proactive. It's all these different things, right? It's actually having that margin and that space to be able to think and to be bored, right? Because there very rarely does anybody have the time to actually be bored, right? And I remember having a creative guy, a graphic designer, a pretty prominent dude on the show, and he was talking about that's where the creativity happens, right? It happens in the boredom. It happens in that space when you've got nothing to do, nothing distracting you, where you can actually have time to think.
While taking a shower.
Yeah,
or walking the dog.
Yeah, that's why I always use the example. It's like, when's the last, where did your last good idea happen? I mean, David, I'll pose that question to you. Last time you had a good idea where you had like kind of an epiphany moment, or maybe it wasn't that dramatic, but it was a good idea that came to mind. What were you doing? Can you remember?
Yeah, absolutely. I have the best ideas every time after I do yoga. Like after this became very apparent to me, and we had a yoga studio in our office in LA called Power Hot Yoga. And almost after every class, when I was standing in the shower, I had like the best ideas ever. And I think the result of this is because I was completely de-stressed. There was like no anxiety, nothing. So complete free flow of thought. And this is just like when it always came to me, I was like, holy cow. And so,
Yeah. And so it's frequently in those moments of, where there's a lack of stress, where you don't have 100 things going on in the back of your head, right? And where you can't be distracted. And so shower for you, right? Yoga is actually what powered that. And then you had this moment in the shower, which you can't do anything, right? You can't be on your phone or doing that stuff. Being on the toilet, right? People don't want to talk about that, but typically you'd have that moment, except for now, the iPhone is making that time very inefficient now, right? I always joke, I'm like, iPhone's been ruining toilet time for the last 10 years, where you used to get some ideas, right? But also, like I talked to founders and they would have these moments that would allow them to think creatively, but that would also de-stress them, like the yoga, but that will also require them to be completely present. So rock climbing, right? So I've had a lot of people on the show that talk about when they go climbing, because you can't think about anything else or you die, right? Or you get incredibly hurt. And so when you're climbing, or if you're you're out you're running, or you're doing something technical that requires your complete presence, especially when it's in an environment that's beautiful and inspiring to you, right? Which typically, in a lot of places rock climbing is, right? Or if you're out there, trail running or whatever. And so, that to me is it's having those moments of slowness where your mind can be clear, you can de-stress, you can think creatively, you can feel alive again, right? You remember that you're actually a human being versus this robot that's just made to like punch keys on a keyboard and put dollars in the bank account.
What do you do to get into the state of slowness? Like, what's your yoga? Is it rock climbing? Is it, because you've been driving, cool fact about you've been traveling through the country in a giant RV with your entire family. I assume that your slowness is just like driving on the highway. Just like,
Yeah. It's funny because we were gone for 8 months this round, and 6 months we're in Southern California, but it's front loaded and then back loaded, right? With if that's the right phrase, we had front end and then on the tail end a lot of driving. So we did 10,000 miles on the road. So yeah, I mean, you're not doing a whole lot of other things when you're driving an 11,000-pound vehicle down the highway with your whole family. But it's many different things for me, man. But it's less about the activity. I guess for me, it's less interesting, the activity, and more interesting is like how you allow for those things to happen, right? The fencing that you create that allows you to have reoccurring space, reoccurring margin, right? And so setting parameters on your calendar or setting habits. And I guess a few of those to me would be, we've got Friday blocked out on the calendar, and I don't always meet it, but it's set aside for two things, and either one of them can happen. Because we have so many kids, I like to have one-on-one time. Like for me, having so many children, my number one fear is that I don't get to connect with them personally, one-on-one, right? And a lot of times when you have the older kids, they're slowed down by the younger kids. And so they don't get to do all the things they're capable of because we got to take into consideration constantly their nap schedule or their ability to do certain activities. And so Friday from noon to 1 is blocked out for one-on-one time. Or have the entire afternoon blocked out for afternoon, what I call afternoon adventure, Friday afternoon adventure. It could be anything. So this Friday, we're going to go to a concert, right? And so it's for me, there's certain activities, and for the listener, there's certain activities. And to me, I mean, they're kind of irrelevant. It's more so like you've got to make space for them to happen. And so, we just touched on really quickly earlier about letting your business activities or frameworks or disciplines bleed over into your personal life. Well, we block out the meeting, right? But we blocked out this call. Mm-hmm. It would never have happened if we didn't block it out, right? Yep. But for some reason, personally, we just don't do that kind of stuff, and it's idiotic, right? Like, why don't we block out one-on-one time? Why don't we block out a date with our spouse? Why don't we just don't do it, right? Because I remember having a friend tell me this, and it got me so furious, right? He said, Peter, there's no way I'm going to put stuff like that on the calendar. And I said, why? He goes, well, those things should just happen. I mean, it's my family, right? I shouldn't have to schedule it like a meeting. I'm like, what the hell? I mean, you should have to do it. You should do it even more, right? Yep. Because it's even more important, right? Like, David, you and I, we get along, right? But my family's more important than that, right? So if I can schedule your call, well, shoot, dude, I should be able to schedule a meeting with my kid, right? Yep. And so to me, it was like completely backwards mindset because they are even more important, right, than any business activity that we could ever think of, ever, right? No matter what the meeting is, what I'm going to do with my family is going to be even more important. And so it's like if we need to have those parameters. And another one could be very simple ones we've heard before, like setting your phone on airplane mode when you get home through dinner time or through bedtime or whatever it is. And so you have undistracted time with the kids. And so I just have all these different disciplines that I try to impose on myself in order to have focus within business, but then also to have that time and space and slowness outside of business and in the personal life.
Yeah, I hear this from time to time when I talk to people about the course. Similar response like, "Hey, I don't want to, put these things like this on the calendar. This should like just magically happen." I was that guy as well. Like I gave 110% in business and expected that family life just magically happened somehow, and like it caused a lot of friction with my wife. And especially once we had our daughter, it became like way more apparent because before it was kind of like, we kind of gotten used to it, but with a little kid needing more attention. And my response to people that say this is always like, you manage the things that are important to you in life. You manage your business, you manage your money, you manage your health. And if you care about your family, then you also have to manage your family. And doing this requires to putting some effort into it, to putting some time into it, and to, doing certain things that will set you up for success in this. It cannot be accidental that all these things happen. And I often heard as well, like, hey, but then this kind of takes the spontaneity out of it. I want things to just, but let's say walking to a meeting, I like to be prepared for this meeting. I like to have an agenda, but then I can still be spontaneous and throw the agenda away and we can do whatever the heck we want to do, right? But I think it's very important to have this in your family life as well if you want to have a higher likelihood of having a happy family life.
That's right, man. And David, what you just said is planned spontaneity, right? I mean, two words that don't make any sense, but you have the space on your calendar to be spontaneous in, right? So like for me, ours says afternoon adventures, right? It didn't say from 1 to 1:15, we will put our shoes on. And from 1:15 to 1:30, we will drive. No, we're not doing that stuff, right? Just like leave the space, like create some space for those things to happen. And maybe we don't do anything. Maybe we just sit and we watch an afternoon movie and we eat popcorn and just like hang out and laugh, right? That's okay too. But you got to create that space first, right? For the meeting to happen in your example.
Absolutely. I'm very curious how you just having a family requires some management, and traveling with 4 kids and your wife on the road, I assume requires a lot of management also in terms of like how are you productive and how do you manage I assume you homeschool. Like how does all this work? I'm very curious.
Yeah. And so, when we're on the road, I'm lucky I've got a pretty strong team, and so they can help to cover the bases while we're driving, right? And so, in that 8-month time period, we traveled for, it was right around 10 and a half weeks or so. And so there wasn't a whole lot of work happening. Although when I did get behind the computer, it was in bursts and batched and extremely efficient. And so I always share the story about how Zig Ziglar is the old motivational speaker that's since passed away, but he talked about how productive you are the day before vacation. And how focused you are, and how you get like 3 days of work done in one day. And it's like, why does that happen? It's because you're so extremely focused, and you have a time constraint, and you're not going to screw around. You're not going to be, there's no water cooler talk. Like, you're just getting things done. And so that's kind of the way that I operate when we're driving. Is if we'll plan some time for Melissa to be with the kids, and I'll hit a coffee shop, or I'll just get away to a spot where I can put my headphones on, and I'll just blast through work, and we'll have things batched. But like I said, we've got a team that we've finally grown to a place where we can have some coverage there. Wasn't always the case, but you eventually get there, right? If you plan for that. And then when we're traveling, and so like we were 6 months in California, I still work kind of in the same capacity where I'm batching. And so there's a book that you may have read. It's called The One Thing by Jay Papasan and Gary Keller. Probably one of the top 3 books I've read in my entire life. Read it last summer, and it's about extreme focus on the one thing that you should be working on and getting yourself to that place. And so, some of the discipline that I have for creating some slowness, but also creating some space for some serious focus, is like, my phone is on airplane mode typically when I go to bed, and it stays on that as long as I can. And so I'll do that because I can have my head down. There's no phone calls. There's very, very rarely morning meetings. And there's no text messaging. There's no slacking, none of that stuff before noon. If I can help it, I can't always help it. So that I can just focus on my, what I call big rocks, right? Which is not my phrase, but the things that I need to work on for that day to be considered a productive day. And so that's what I'm doing, man. And then that way it leaves space for me to either have the grinding, just kind of like, back and forth email work in the afternoon, or I can take the afternoon off, but only because I've got that focus time in the morning.
It's all about planning and scheduling, right?
And it's about priorities, man. And you mentioned it earlier, right? So it's just, you show what you really are interested in tackling by scheduling that and putting it on your calendar. And if there's nothing on your calendar, then nothing's truly in your line of sight, in your focus.
I'm a big fan of mission statements and vision statements. And I'm curious what the mission of Mission Meets. Do you have it spelled out for this business?
Yeah, and it's coming more and more into focus. So the company's just under 2 years old, and we just got done shooting some video. I just got the final version of one of them today, so I'll have to send that over to you to include. But I read a book called Bold by Peter Diamandis about 2.5 years ago. And I'm a firm believer in books as far as timing, when your mind's open to it, that you're much more receptive to a book than when you're just kind of reading it for reading's sake, and then reading it in an inspiring environment. So I was in a place where I wasn't super happy with the projects that we were working on. At the same time, I was in California, and I was taking walks every day to the coffee shop, because typically that's what I'm doing when we're traveling. And I'm reading this book, and it talked about, in part of it, about how your business should have some sort of purpose associated with it, and how it's going to be much more fulfilling than just trying to make piles and piles of money, which is fun, but not that fun, right? As opposed to like feeling like you're making an impact in the world. And so that's the seed that got planted in my head. And then about 6 months later, a friend of mine and I started Mission Meats. And the idea is that we're meat snacks that give back. And so for a vegan like yourself, you like the give it back part, but not the meat snack part, and that's okay. You could just buy them for friends or something. But anyways, man. And so the idea is that we would partner with organizations that we feel like are making a real impact in the world. And when I say real impact, it's more of like an entrepreneurial kind of mindset where you're teaching a man how to fish versus, giving a man a fish, that whole statement. And so we go to start this company, and I've got a friend of mine that's, taken thousands and thousands of people to Malawi and Sierra Leone, Africa. And I said to her, listen, I'm starting a food company. I want to partner with food programs, right? And this is before I had this teaching, man, that fish philosophy or this idea. And so, is that me ringing or you?
No. And I don't hear it, so
you don't hear it. Perfect. Okay. All right. And so I meet with this friend, and I ask her. I said, "Listen, I have this food business idea. I want to partner with food programs, and because I think that makes most sense." And she said, "I hate it." I said, "Okay, tell me more." And she's like, "Food programs are great if there's like famine or war or something like that, but otherwise they're terrible because they come into a village and then the village just becomes dependent on it, and they're not necessarily any better off in the long run. What you need to do is partner with organizations that are coming in and empowering the folks and helping them rise up and support themselves, create some commerce, hire some people, do these things." And so she introduced me to an organization and these guys were on the 30 under 30 list, just really doing amazing stuff. And that was our first mission organization called Educate out of Uganda. And these folks come in, they put kids that are in high school and college through entrepreneurship program, and these people come out just with amazing stories. And they're creating business for themselves, and they're truly empowered. And so every organization since then that we partner with has the very, very same philosophy. What's so great about it, David, is not only do we get to give our time and money and resources to them, but it gets leveraged, right? Because they're not just getting this one-for-one gift. They're going to take that money and it's going to be multiplied through their efforts, right? It's going to be multiplied to the business that they create, right? So you give somebody a goat, right? They're not going to slaughter it. They're going to milk it, right? And then they're going to breed these goats and create more goats, right? So we have a goat breeding project that we partnered with. And so there's just all these different organizations. And so for us, we really want to take our skill set, our resources, and be able to have that leveraged, right? And so they can 2, 3, 4, 10x what we've actually given and contributed. And I tell you, man, this is such a fun way to do business because you push to make money sometimes just to make money, and that's cool, right? Making money is cool, and being able to support your family, do fun things is cool. But when you see, because we've dedicated at minimum 10%. Last year we exceeded that quite a bit of profits that we wanted to give away. But when you make more money, you see that mission account increasing, right? Yeah. And it's just so fun. And when it's earmarked, it's so easy to give away, right? It's just there, and you're used to it just being there, and it's kind of set aside automatically. And then we just get to give that money away freely. So we helped in a big way a building project in Africa, in Swaziland, right? This building project is going to get started for a feeding site, for a care point. There's just like so many really, really cool things happening, and we're not even 2 years old yet.
That's really awesome. Also, I think we talked about this before the call. I'm a big fan of for-purpose businesses. Everybody, founding team, and also everybody that works there, like wakes up in the morning with like a true purpose and knows that they really have an impact and just not making shareholders happy, And I'm not a big fan of nonprofits because it always feels like they have to beg for money to make something happen, and like this kind of breeds some inefficiencies, and it also kind of feels like a car that doesn't have an engine. Somebody else has to always push it. So I'm a big believer in for-purpose businesses.
Yeah,
I'm not a big fan of the meat part, but that's a whole other story.
That's a whole other story. And just a real quick, addition to that, man, is like there's an organization that's called Not for Sale, and they're anti-human trafficking organization, and they've got a company. I don't know the exact structure, but they have an investment arm of that business that invests in mostly food businesses that are then dedicated to contributing back, I think 5% or something like that, to not for sale. And so not for sale has all these organizations that are for profit, that are creating an amazing product, but then are also feeding back the true mission of the business. And then, it becomes, not self-regulating, but it becomes self-sufficient, right? So not only has one engine, it's got several engines that are powering this amazing organization.
Yeah, I'm a really big fan of it. I also actually, one other idea that I had was for, I also want to get into the food sector, but with a, different spin on it. My idea was to, and this is kind of, to some degree, criticizing the meat thing, but I'll go there anyway. Usually, I don't like to be preachy about this. I like to just kind of live by example and not preach to others. But since we're talking about this, we'll just talk about this. So, reading that the mass consumption of meat has a big negative effect on the environment. I don't want to throw around percentages, but it's really big in terms of pollution, in terms of getting rid of rainforests and yada yada yada. And and also another problem with food is that there's often, or most of the time, the food is not really good food. There's preservatives, there's things in the ingredients list that you can't even pronounce. I'm being vegetarian for 20 years and now vegan for a few years. I always read ingredients lists and it's really shocking what you find in there. So my idea was to create a label for clean food, that then can be, first of all, have an online catalog of food that's considered clean in terms of my standards, clean in terms of being organic, being vegan, and not having any crazy ingredients, and then, have this as a seal for the products to increase conversions, because when I walk through a supermarket and I see a product that would have the seal and I don't have to go through see, hey, what's in there, I just grab it and go, but at some point I may get into this. And
no, I love it, man. I love it. And consumers need that pre-filtered product, right? We look for things, we look for non-GMO verification, we look for gluten-free stamps, we look for all these different things. So then you don't have to think, right? So we have a local co-op here, and it's quite a bit more expensive than anywhere else you could shop. But you go there when you don't want to think. Right? You don't have to read the labels. It's all pre-filtered. You don't have to think about whether you're buying local, because they source as much local as possible, right? You don't have to worry about, contaminants, all these different things, right? And so I think that the labeling, and then as a consumer, we do these things even when we don't think about it. And so we have certain things we look for. And so organic's definitely one of those things. When you look and you see organic, a lot of times I don't even think. And then my wife is like, Peter, this has a ton of sugar in it. It's organic sugar, but there's a lot of sugar in there, right? And so as consumers, we need kind of that filtering process. So I say go for it. For us, all of our products grass-fed. A lot of it is, sourced from an island. So there's not the deforestation stuff that's happening where we're sourcing our product. And all of our ingredient decks, you can all see, read, pronounce everything that's on there. And it's all non-GMO ingredients, all that good stuff. And so I'm with you, man. Not a vegan, but I totally get where you're coming from. I mean, because what's interesting is that a lot of times, and this, is you look at stuff that are meat substitutes, right? So a lot of the stuff that you may be thinking tofu or other things, and you look and you're like, wait a minute, I think I'd be better off eating meat, because a lot of the meat substitutes have a lot of chemicals and unpronounced. So you're like, wait a minute, I think I'd be better off eating meat, than eating whatever the heck is in this, And so, I think a pre-filtering, pre-labeled process is cool. I say you go for it.
I'm just a lazy person. It's just scratching my own itch,
I hear you, man.
How do you handle the homeschooling aspect? You both teach him? Does your wife teach him? Do you go to, I don't know, stop somewhere? I'm not sure how this works. So just Curious, yeah.
My wife handles most of it. God bless her. She is home with the kids, thankfully, and gets to hang out with them on a day-to-day basis. And so she manages curriculum. And it's interesting because I think the biggest misconception is that school at home needs to look like school at school. And so the hours don't need to be the same. The curriculum doesn't need to be anywhere near the same. The structure doesn't have to be at all the same. It's one of the main reasons you homeschool, so you can kind of dictate those things and change what you don't like. And the teacher to student ratio is much lower, right? And so we've got 1-4 versus 1-30 or whatever the normal ratio is. And so she manages that. And what's really great about it is that we get to take the kids' interest and turn those into all of the different categories, right? And so my daughter's into horses, and so we can teach her genealogy through horses. You can teach her history. You can teach her all kinds of stuff through that interest that she has. But my wife manages all of that, and she's definitely much better at it than I am.
Roles and responsibilities, right?
You got it. That's right.
A friend of mine is also touring the US and Canada with his RV and his kids. I think he has also 4 kids. Kind of crazy. You should hang out.
Wish we did. Wish we should. I want his info.
He said 3 or 4, but anyhow, he said what works really well for them is they always go to different libraries on the way, or different monuments, or kind of like historic stuff. So it's very, very cool experience for them to always kind of get exposed to cool stuff.
You think about this, David. I mean, you can read something and it could maybe have an impact on you on some level. But if you live, breathe, eat, and it's all there right in front of you in real life, it's completely different, right? And so on this last road trip, we went to Half Moon Bay. We did the Northern California coast. We did the Oregon coast. We went through Portland. We went to Whitefish, Montana. We went to Glacier National Park. We went to Yellowstone National Park. We went to Grand Teton Park. We went to Mount Rushmore. We went to Crazy Horse. I mean, dude, and we were on water everywhere, and they learned how to kayak. I mean, these things all happened IRL, right? Like in real life. Now, you tell me between that and reading about those things, which one you're going to retain more, right?
Yeah.
Which one you're going to learn more? Which one? Because you're going to remember. You remember when we were in the water and it was cold, and we got to see those mountains, and we got to learn about what was going on there and the history of this park, like all these different things. And so they absolutely road school, right? They absolutely live or learn, on the road. And so we get to incorporate those things. And then what's cool is I just keep notes on my phone. My son will say, well, dude, tell me a little bit more about Yellowstone. I'm like, I have no idea how this happened, but let's write it down and we'll Google it when we get back, right? And so and there's all these questions that's happen. And so there's learning after the fact. This trip, we actually didn't plan at all. We just started driving, and we just met our friends along the way when we were driving through towns and stuff like that. But when we do get the plan, we try to learn and prep before the trip. And so we'll Google different things that we're going to see. We can learn about the history so that when they get there, they can say, oh, I remember when we read that. Now I get to see it. And then now here's some more follow-up questions, and we can learn those things. And so, it's just interesting, man. We, I don't know if it's just an American thing or not, but you just think your kids aren't as smart as they really. You don't give them as much credit as you should. They're just such curious and amazing little human beings, and they can absorb things in so many different ways. And we think that it needs to happen at school, 8 to 5, behind a desk with a textbook and a teacher, and that's just not the case, man. I mean, we all learn differently. My wife thrived in school. I hated school. I mean, just the thought of going back to school, like my wife was talking about back to school time, and then the friends that are going back to school, it made my stomach hurt. I hated it, because I always felt like it was a waste of time, and I can learn a little bit differently. And I think that probably 3 out of our 4 kids, they thrive learning, with their hands, right, and seeing these things with their eyes and actually living through them. And so that's my very long answer to your short question.
Yeah, I can relate. I was never a fan of school, actually, but for me it always depended. If I liked the teacher, I had good grades. If I hated the teacher, then I let the teacher know that I hated him. And I actually went to 14 different schools.
Wow.
Which is I was like a slight trouble student. And I dropped out of school when I was 15. I was kind of scratching my entrepreneurial itch. And I was always driven to learn. I love learning. And, I consume a ton of books, but I always want to learn what I want to learn and not what somebody that I don't like tells me that I have to do.
That's right.
And what's the guy? He made a documentary about, he did Bowling for Columbine. What's his freaking name?
I'm blanking right now.
Well, anyhow, he made a documentary about schools in Sweden. Have you seen this?
I have not seen it. I'm embarrassed to say that. Michael
it's pretty
Moore.
crazy. Michael Moore, yeah. They have no homework, or if they have homework, it's like 10 minutes of their time, and they have like, I don't know, like go 3 hours a day to school or something like this, and they have like the best grades and learn much more, retain much more. And they in this was just a snippet of the documentary. They talked about how the American school system works with these standardized tests that they just spend, I don't know, half the time just preparing for these tests. That's all multiple choice, and it's like you don't really learn anything. It's all about like, because we have to grade, we have to know which school is the best. And was very happy that we bounced and that Emma will not grow up in this kind of environment. And homeschooling, like my we both are not really cut out to homeschool. So I have like very extreme respect, to see what you're doing. But yeah, it was good that we bounced.
Yeah, and the thing is that it's not an accident that school is the same length as the average workday, and so it's not necessarily out of necessity that they need to be there all day learning. And what's crazy about homework is that they're at school already super long. What the heck do they need more work to do for? Like, what do they need? What are they doing at school if they need to do more work at home? Like there should be enough time at school to get all that work done, right?
Yeah, kids have to be kids. I think my conspiracy theory is that this system is all built from back in the days to craft or to produce factory workers, and this is kind of still like obey what the guy tells you, don't think out of the box, just kind of. So I think this is still lingering around and needs to be disrupted.
Yes,
so
it's the hangover, man. It's the hangover from the industrial age.
I hate hangovers. I stopped drinking when I was 23 due to a hangover. So. I'd love to hear some, and you mentioned a few already, but maybe you have a few more, some work-life balance tips from the master.
Man, I think that, the groundwork has already been laid here, right? And so the biggest thing for me is to be paying attention to the life that you're living, and to really ask yourself this question: is this like, what is amazing about my life? Right? And writing all these things down. And so I'm with this exercise for the first time at the beginning of the year, like sit in an inspiring place, like don't be distracted, and with a blank piece of paper and like no requirements. It's just like, what is amazing about my life? And just like thought, just brain dump on a piece of paper, what is amazing? And then think about how you can have more of those things, right? And whether they're activities, material goods, hopefully not too many there that you need, because they're not going to bring you too much happiness, but having just all these things written down and how you can have more of those. And then have another several pages, right? I think I ended up having 5 full pages when I was done, of the things that bring you headache and stress and anxiety, right? And hurt and worry to your life. Just dump it all down. And then start categorizing these things, right? Some of it might be work, some of it may be personal, some of it might be in your relationship, etc. And think about how you can get rid of those things. You're not going to be able to get rid of them all, but how can you get rid of most of them, right? And there are ways to get rid of them. And some of them might be really painful, like just moving to a new city, right? Or getting out of a bad relationship, or actually taking and shining the light on yourself and realizing that you are maybe the cause of a lot of your problems, and you got to, change the way that you're acting and change the way you're walking through life. And so for me, I think that it's taking the time to slow down and to set aside some time regularly. Like my next one's coming up on Friday here, where I blocked the calendar off completely. At least until my one time at noon with my kids, and just to sit and reevaluate again, like what's going well, what's not going well, right? What did I think I wanted more of? And now that I have more of it, I don't want it anymore, right? And just to continue to reevaluate. And the image I have is I learned about a decade ago from another entrepreneur, is a sailing term called tacking. And so when you're in a sailboat, which I never have been, I've never like navigated a boat, is that you go from point A and you want to get to point B and it's never in a straight line, right? And so you're going to adjust the sail and it's going to be a zigzag, right? Zigzag, and that's called tacking, right? And you don't want to have this big old tack. It's like the most inefficient way to get there because the wind's always changing. So you don't want to like, be in the sailboat for an entire day, look up and see that you're way off course and have to do a massive correction. You want to do small corrections. And so instead of us doing a once a year, once every couple of year evaluation on what's going good in life, how about every quarter? Right?
Yeah, I propose this in the Managing Happiness course to reevaluate your goals every quarter, to sit down and
I love it. I love it.
Them again.
See, we do think alike. And so to like continue to reevaluate and to pay attention. I think so many of us are walking through life with our eyes closed, complaining about what's not working, complaining about not getting what we want to get, complaining about this person and that person or this situation, but not doing anything about it, right? Or not actually digging down and thinking like, why does this suck? Like, why do I hate this? And I like to ask why like a kid, right? And so, David, you might tell me like, man, I really don't like... I really don't like my business. You didn't tell me this, but you don't like my business. Why don't you like my business? Oh, well, I work a lot. Why do you work a lot? Oh, it's because I have to manage X, Y, and Z. Why do you have to manage X, Y, and Z? Oh, it's because I can't find dependable work. Why can't you find dependable work? Well, I found some people, but they haven't worked out. Why didn't they work out? And you find out like, oh, you have all this work and you don't like your business because you're managing too much work, and it's because you're poor at evaluating people and you need to bring somebody in to evaluate hires. Maybe you just need to use some assessment tests. And now you're like, oh, okay, now I can go back to the talent pool, use assessment tests, hire people that are going to be amazing for the position, and they're going to take off my workload. And now I like my life again.
I like my business again.
And to me, it's truly that simple, because we never, as my mentor says, peel back the onion. We don't peel it back to find like the core thing, right? And it's never the first answer, right? I remember having Derek Sivers on the show, and he wanted all of the questions ahead of time, which I never do. And he goes, the reason I want all the questions is because my first response is never the most interesting one. I'm going to give you this response that I've given 1,000 people before, this answer to the question, because it's easiest and it's just like, it's not the most interesting. It's like the second or third answer. My second or third response, like that's the most interesting. Like that's where the meat of it is, right? And so we've got to like continue to say why, just like a little kid, until we find out really, truly why we responded to this question with the specific answer of why something's not good or good, right? And then do something about it. Like, and then take some action on it.
That's really good. I have to incorporate this when I have our family meetings with my wife once a week, and we talk about improvements, for example, like kind of why XYZ drives you nuts, and kind of why I do this, and kind of peel back the onion. I think it's going to be, finding solutions much faster that way.
It's so much faster, but I will warn you, man. You need to let her know ahead of time you're going to practice this, because it can be very annoying. Like you can ask it and it's like, "Why? I just answered you. Why are you asking me this again?" And it's because like you got to be prepared to be like, "Oh, I need to dig deeper, right? I need to know why this feels this specific way." Otherwise, she's gonna say, "Stop, David. I mean, knock it off."
I'll give it a shot and let you know how it goes.
Cool.
One question I always ask everybody towards the end is, what are the books that influenced you the most in your life, and what is the last book that you've read? I ask this because I'm a huge book nerd.
Yeah.
And I always need new material.
Yeah. So 10 years ago, a 4-hour work week, I was in a really, really bad place. And I was traveling with my one kid at the time, 6 months old, and was in Mexico. And I couldn't hang out with anybody at night because I was working too much and I didn't have anybody to delegate to. And I opened this book in this beautiful place and I started reading it, and I just couldn't stop. And definitely applied it to my life right away. Bold a couple years ago for the reasons I just mentioned. The One Thing a year ago, which was, hugely impactful. Amazing authors. The co-author is Gary Keller, the founder of Keller Williams, largest real estate company in the world, I'm pretty sure right now.
The One?
The One Thing.
The One Thing, yeah.
The One
It's
Thing.
a really good one, yeah. I like it.
Incredible book. And what I'm reading right now is a book, I believe, from the 70s. Ex-NFL, I think was a linebacker, sent it to me. It's called The Psychology of Winning by Dennis Waitley, and 10 Qualities of a Total Winner. And it's like really, really bad. I'll show you here. Really, really bad, like cover, very ugly, ugly font and everything. And it's a really incredible book, dude.
You posted a question on Facebook yesterday. I saw it.
Yeah.
What was it?
Well, there were two. I posted one yesterday, and then I posted another one today. And I'll tell you what the one today said. It said, if I were my wife, let's see.
Oh, yeah.
Hold on a second.
Yeah, if I were my wife, would I be the ideal husband, or would I like a husband like me, type of thing, or right?
How would I like to have a husband like me if I were my wife, right? Yeah. And so I mean, it's an incredible like thought exercise. And his whole thing was about having putting yourself in somebody else's shoes and really gaining their perspective. Tells a really interesting story in there about how a mom was taking their kid to meet Santa Claus in New York, I believe it was, and the kid started crying, and she's like, "Would you stop whining? Santa Claus doesn't bring presents to whiners," right? She's just frustrated because she thought she was doing him a favor and doing something good for him, and he was fussing. And his shoe came untied, and she kneeled down to tie his shoe, and she looked up. And she saw from his perspective for the first time just how scary it was, and how there was just like these huge people, massive groups of people all around him, and it's frightening, right? And so his whole thing was like, you need to put yourself in other people's position so you can actually look from their perspective and see what they see. And then maybe you'll make some corrections that you thought don't need to be corrected, right? And then the question from yesterday, or the statement from yesterday, was the fact that we literally become what we think about most of the time. This is from page 5, right? And to me, it affected me because we're back at home and we're not traveling, and I'm feeling sorry for myself because I like to travel and I don't want to be where I'm at right now. And then just realizing that I'm not doing myself any favor by having a pity party, right? Because you become what you think about, right? And I want to think about success. I want to think about making an impact. I want to think about those things, because when I'm thinking about those, I'm pumped and I feel like I can dominate the world. And it's not because I need to have a bunch of ego, but it's because I need to know that I can and that I will. Because when I do that, I make it happen. And if I think that if I'm having a pity party, well, I'm just going to continue to wallow in that self-pity. And I'm not doing anybody any favors, myself, my family, or anybody else that we want to make an impact on.
In terms of pity and kind of I call it emotional resilience, I have this gratitude rock that I pick up every morning, and I go through the things I'm grateful for, and this kind of makes all these reasons why I would have self-pity or not be in a good mood go away, because you always have so many amazing things going for you in your life, like kids, wife, friends, health, where you are. Like, even though where you are right now, it's still beautiful if you think about it, right? And
yes.
And then like these big problems of the moment will just go away, because we always get sucked into the problems of the moment, and then we don't see clear anymore. And that's a really good exercise to make sure you have the 30,000 foot view. And I have the stone in my pocket throughout the day, and sometimes I feel it, and this always brings me back, even though sometimes I may be stressed out about something. And at the end of the day, when I come home, I take the stone out of my pocket and I go through the things that went great this day, because often, you have an amazing morning, super productive, and at 5 p.m. you have a unpleasant conversation with wife, employee, customer, or whatever, and you think the whole day sucked, but it not. There was lots of positive stuff going on. And this kind of, builds up this emotional resilience muscle, and then you can just like plow through whatever happens to you in life.
I love that, man. I love that. And I think it was Tim Ferriss, somebody prominent like that, he posted about a jar of gratitude. And so he was saying that when anything good happens, he writes it on a scrap piece of paper and throws it in the jar. And so that when he's having a bad day and he feels like nothing's good in his life, he just dumps it out and he starts reading through it, right? And I have not picked up that habit for whatever reason, but I've recommended it to 1,000 others. But I think that's really interesting, man, because we quickly forget the wins and we so slowly forget the losses, right? We so slowly forget that bad call, but we'll easily forget the 10 good calls before that.
I think I'm personally not very affected by negative things. I always see the positive aspects in whatever happens, and even though if it's very negative, because you can always turn things into something positive. It's like, we've been hacked before at MaxCDN, and this was like, pretty extreme, but we made it through, and because of this hack, we built a lot of security features that protected us and our clients from stuff like this happen ever again. And this was like a USP for us and won us a bunch of big clients because the other competitors didn't have this. So it's like always like how do you look at things? If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And you can't control what happens to you in life, but you're in full control on how you react to it. It's kind of like my mental exercise with everything that's going on, and to always be the happy hippie that I am.
I love that, man. This book talks about a winner mentality versus a loser mentality, right? And you clearly have the winner mentality, right? And so, it's interesting that you say that, and I think that it's so easy to look at the negative side of things. Like, we had a potential new producer that we were going to bring on, and the guy was just super slow, dropping the ball on things, just not making it happen. And I told my co-founder, I said, man, he did us a huge favor. Like, he did us a huge favor, because we never got into business with him. And thank God we didn't go into business with him and then find out that he couldn't produce, or that he was going to overpromise and underdeliver. And thank God he dropped the ball, because he was such a crappy vendor. I started searching for a new one, and I found not one but two incredible new partners that we're working with now, and I wouldn't have found them if he hadn't dropped the ball for us, right? And so
everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, it does, And you tell someone who's going through something rough that everything happens for a reason, and they want to punch you in the balls, right? But it's true, right? It's totally true that it happens, and you're like, oh, you did me a favor. I appreciate it. Like, thank you.
It's just like, really, how do you view these things? Like, my wife having breast cancer is like really sucked, but like, it's the fact that happened. But I look at it with gratitude, because I had this wake up moment because of it, and I'm also grateful that she's okay. Or my mother passed away 3.5 years ago, and we've been very close with her, and it was very tough for us. But thinking about this, if I think about this in a negative way of like, oh, poor me, now I don't have her anymore, then it pulls me down. Versus when I think about her, I'm so grateful that I had this amazing person in my life, that I learned so much from her, etc., etc. And other people have like shitty relationships with their parents, or don't even know their parents. Some. It's always like how you look at things, and the world is beautiful.
It's true. I'm with you, man. I'm with you. I agree with this hippie comment.
This was really, really awesome. Thank you very much for being on the show and sharing so openly. I think it was really awesome. Thank you very much.
Hey, man,
do you have any shout outs or things you want to get out there?
Yeah, man.
Things you need.
Yeah.
Things you want to pitch, sell, whatever it is.
Yeah, I did not necessarily pitch, but we've got this new kind of video series of videos that we're putting out, just to talk about the mission behind Mission Meets, and who we are and why we produce what we produce, and what the product's about, and all that. And that's going to be fun. But we've got a new. I don't know if you want to call it agenda, but after that, we want to have some submissions from the audience. And so I've got some that we're working on right now that are going to be the preliminary ones, with a tagline of "What's your mission?" And so what we want to do is people that are in our demographic, and there's pretty much everyone from parents to climbers to hikers to bikers to anybody that's athletic, so people that are on ketogenic diet or paleo diet, whatever it is, that have a mission focus in their life. And so a friend of mine, he's a lifter and a trainer, but he also does ocean therapy with veterans that have severe PTSD, and then also inner city youth that are at risk. And so he will teach them how to surf. And so he's going to talk about that, and we're going to have some amazing footage of him, both regular video and drone footage of him teaching people how to surf. And it's a faith-based organization, so he talks about religion religion. And then he also just like helps them work through the issues that they're working through. And it's a beautiful program. And so we're going to talk about that, and we're going to want more submissions. I mean, folks that have a mission focus in their life that they want to share, and we'll be able through our reach on social that we're going to start pushing to give some visibility to not only the mission that we have as an organization, but who our consumers are and the missions that they have in their life.
That's really awesome. It's make an impact in the world because you promote good stuff, encourage people to do more good stuff or get support for people that are doing these good things. That's also from a marketing perspective, it's a really great thing to associate your brand with these things. And the most positive way of how you can, run ads or make, create awareness about your company. That's really awesome.
We feel like it's going to be a triple win, right? I mean, it's a win for us, it's a win for the missions that we partner with, and it's a win for our consumers' mission that they have in their life. So I don't know, man. To me, like, this is such a much more fun way to do business. Like, we can push Facebook ads all day long and drive traffic and make sales, right? But how much more fun is it to share someone else's mission alongside ours, right? Yep. And to gain awareness that way. Like, that is just so much more fun to do, right? And clearly we want to sell more product, right? We're here to sell more products, but that's not the core intent. It's going to be a byproduct of just sharing these beautiful stories. And so I'm pretty excited about it.
Awesome, man. Definitely, when you have the links or the videos, I'll definitely include them.
Cool.
in the post.
Appreciate that.
Well, awesome, Peter. Thank you very much for being on the show. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.